Hello, I'm Brett Weighill, and this is Climate Action Figures.
Hello and welcome to the final edition of our 5-part series that explores First Nations wisdom and voices on climate action figures. My name, as always, is John Whidden, and this week on the show, you get to meet Brett, the one who connected us with all of our last 4 guests. But first, this week's Quick Fix. For this week's Quick Fix, we are going back to last season when Twyla sent us in this I Love My Planet boxed set of cards. Thanks very much, Twyla. And today we're looking at one that says, Be Food Smart. It says, did you know that 1 in 5 bags that we take home from the grocery store ends up in a landfill? To see how much food you waste and to find ways to avoid it, keep a diary for a week and record all the food wasted in your house. Sounds like a good idea. Thanks for that, Twyla. And welcome, Brett.
Hello, how's it going, John?
I'm great, thanks. What do you think about that Quick Fix?
I think that is very topical for some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today because, part of our whole greenhouse project here at Piikani Nation Secondary School is all about being food smart from, the seed to the compost. So the entire cycle of food and the entire cycle of nutrition with our bodies and how, we take from the land to empower ourselves and then we give back to the land. And, here at the school, we really want students to be involved in all processes of the food cycle, from growing their own food to processing their own food, storing their own food, and composting any waste that's left over.
The whole big picture there.
Exactly.
And then we also get into that First Nations way of looking at things in terms of using everything and being thankful for every part and not wasting. So but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Brett, you're a school administrator at Piikani Nation Secondary School, but not a First Nations member yourself. So how did you get connected with the people there?
I originally wanted to be an ethnobotanist and study, traditional plants and medicines, maybe down in the Amazon rainforest. And during my undergrad, I actually had a chance to go spend a month down in the Amazon. And, actually during that time, I got to participate in a ceremony with a shaman. And, during that process, I kind of received some wisdom that I, didn't really know how to put into my life at the moment. The vision was that, hey, wanting to learn about plants and medicines and protect the environment and everything is all good, but why are you flying all the way down here to Ecuador to do that? And the wisdom that I received was that I was going to come home to Canada and I would be doing ethnobotany work here and in helping, the people back in Canada in my neck of the woods, I would by proxy be reconnecting back to South America and helping, the people of the Amazon rainforest and Ecuador. So I finished up my undergrad degree.
Just before you go into that, I have to ask if you connected with First Nations people in South America as well.
Yeah, I did. So we were working with local tribes there, building bathhouses, washing houses out on their traditional territory, and then doing an exchange of knowledge. So they were teaching us about their land, their language, their culture, and then we were helping teach students English and providing, some infrastructure for their community to stay, healthy and safe in their relationship with water and waste. So it was an excellent month. Yeah.
Sounds like quite an experience. Okay, so back to your education and how that connected you to the First Nations people here.
Yeah, so my professional inquiry project that I did was completely based on kind of breaking down the walls of the classroom, breaking down the tyranny of the clock, and really reimagining, how we view modern education. A big focus on getting out on the land and learning not only from the land's occupants, the animals, the plants, the people that use that land, but also learning from the land's time scale, really broadening the sense of education beyond the 45-minute class block. And as I gave that presentation, there were some people from Piikani in the room who were doing some recruiting. and said, hey, we really loved your presentation. We think you would be a good fit out in Piikani, and we need a science teacher, and you're a science teacher. And I had a choice to make between, going to CCH, big Catholic high school, teaching science there, which was, kind of my childhood experience, or taking the opportunity, the privilege to go somewhere new, go somewhere unfamiliar, and put myself into a position where I'm going to get to learn every single day. And I'm going to get to continue my lifelong educational journey. So that's what I went with. I decided to go with Piikani.
2 weeks ago, we spoke with Gracie and heard her story about telling you about collecting sweetgrass. Why was that important in the genesis of this whole sweetgrass program?
So when I first started out in Piikani, the lands department head and one of our board of trustee elders kind of pulled me aside and said, okay, hey, Mr. New Science Guy, we have a task for you. We want a science program that, allows Piikani students to participate in all the highest levels of scientific research, science fairs, science competitions, research conferences, workshops, publishing, really taking a high level approach to science without departing from Piikani language and culture. So what they really tasked me was, how can we do science in a Blackfoot way? How can we do science in specifically a Piikani way? How can we use science in order to protect our language and culture? And we had an abandoned greenhouse that hadn't been used. So it was, let's get this greenhouse going as a space where we can intersect and weave science and Piikani traditional knowledge. And my first thought, is like, okay, let's plant some rows of vegetables. Let's get some food going for a food program. This will be easy. But as the project progressed, I realized that I was, kind of falling back onto a European way of looking at the problem and a European way of solving the problem. And as I started listening to the elders and specifically our students too, Gracie, who is very involved culturally, her and her family go out and harvest sweetgrass for ceremonies and braid it and bless it. And, hearing from them that the traditional medicines are becoming harder and harder to find here in the community, and that is the most important cultural element for them when they're going on the land is these specific culturally important plants, rather than just any plant, rather than just finding the best carbon sequestering tree and planting it. It was, what is the most important plant? And so our project shifted to focusing on sweetgrass, mint, tobacco, all of these traditional plants that were harvested in the area but are becoming increasingly hard to find. Through talking with Gracie and her telling me her stories about her family and how important sweetgrass was to her, we decided as a team to focus on sweetgrass first in the greenhouse, because if we can do it with sweetgrass, then we can do it with any other plant down the road. But we're going to have community buy-in, we're going to have cultural buy-in, and our students are actually going to care about the plants that are growing in the greenhouse because it's important to their daily life.
So you're starting with sweetgrass, you're going to move on to tobacco, mint, other things, but you're also looking at the carbon sequestration value of each of these. Is that right?
One of the goals of the project was to produce scientific research and actually get a publication that Piikani Nation had authorship and copyright of. So really it's also pushing the envelope on that nation to nation collaboration when it comes to environmental research, rather than having external researchers come in with a plan that was developed off reserve, with goals that are developed off reserve, and coming and trying to make it fit in this ecosystem. Our goal was to do a science research collaboration led by the nation from the ground up. We kind of have an economic approach to our environmental issues. So we create a market for carbon, and the goal is to use monetary incentives to lead people to environmental action or initiatives.
I'm just going to stop you there. That's a really important point, I think, because the only time we come up with great solutions to the environmental issues we face these days is when they have economic benefit to us. How is that different than the First Nations way of viewing things?
Well, so the name of our project, which was granted to us by Elder William Big Bull, Supipolmaksin. And so Supipolmaksin means transferring back to the earth in a spirit of reciprocity. And it's kind of the Piikani traditional view of planting or laying seeds into the ground. A lot of people talk that traditionally Blackfoot people didn't garden or didn't farm or didn't do agriculture. And that kind of neglects a lot of the traditional medicine harvesting that was very central to the Piikani people. There is a relationship with the plants of the land. It wasn't just the bison, but also, there is a long history of neighboring tribes sharing information around seeds, around cultivation of important plants as a way to not only build inter-community relations, but also just survive when times get very hard.
Now, Thomas has told us about how humble and small the program was at the beginning. Mike has spoken a bit about where it's sitting at now. And when you look back at the program, where it's come from, where it is now, where it's going to, what are the great successes in your view?
The biggest success, and I've heard Thomas express this, is just that the project has been sustainable and ongoing year over year over year. So it originally came as an idea in 2019. 2020, we started, our plans of getting the greenhouse going. Then we were planting the sweetgrass in 2021. 2022, we did the research harvest with Agriculture Agri-Foods Canada. Our paper was recently published this year. Last year, we expanded from sweetgrass into mint and tobacco, which we now have in the garden. Plus, we're also growing tomatoes, peas, just lots of nice pickable vegetables that when the kids are out there interacting with the plants, they can have a quick and easy little snack and learn exactly where our food comes from. But the fact that the program's just going year over year is probably one of the biggest successes. And, Thomas, when we first started, he was, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to grow sweetgrass. Whoop-de-doo. I know this. Projects never last long, and somebody will get bored, or this project will fail. And just getting to see him over 5 years from grade 7 to grade 12 involved in the project, it's succeeding. We're going to conferences, and other schools are wanting to hear from our students. Different, media and podcasts like yourself are wanting to talk to our students and hear about their experience. And the students start to realize that, okay, maybe there is something valuable here about my cultures, because they're in it every day. They live on the reserve. There's smudges every day. To them, it's regular. So they're like, why would anybody care that we are growing sweetgrass, or like sweetgrass can help the environment? Why would anybody off reserve even care about that? And as we got to take our kids to these different environmental conferences put on by Inside Education or CPAWS or the Canadian Rockies Youth Network, the kids started to see that they could be leaders in this industry, that people wanted to hear their voice, that people wanted to see their solutions, that, them planting sweetgrass wasn't just some whoop-de-doo little thing. It was actually an inspiring, innovative solution that other people could replicate. We received the Clean 50 Top Sustainability Project of the Year, beating out projects all across Canada for that same reason, because it was something that's inspiring, innovative, but most important, it's repeatable. We can replicate this in different places. Any school, can put into practice a traditional medicines gardening program. Any sort of cultural planting program. To me, the real big thing is environmental solutions that go through culture first. We're not just putting that culture or the First Nations perspective as a tag onto our initiatives, but that we're actually developing them through a First Nations involvement and the First Nations land from the ground level, that the communities are taking a leadership role in these initiatives on their lands and on their traditional territories that extend beyond the reserve area.
Right. It's not just a checkbox that we lay over top to say we've done this.
Yeah.
Congratulations on all those successes, and especially on your publication of the research. That's a pretty important milestone to reach.
Yeah, you guys can find it in Frontiers in Microbiology. If you search sweetgrass, Frontiers in Microbiology, you'll see our paper, which gives the carbon profile of sweetgrass and the carbon interactions between the soil, the atmosphere, and the different components of the plant's anatomy. So
we will try to put that in the show notes. I'm also going to include in the show notes an article, a great article from the Narwhal on what's going on there. Another one from Resilience Institute, several global stories. And there's a YouTube video that I really recommend people watch that gives you a good sense of what the program's about. We'll put all those in the show notes so you can So you can peruse those at your leisure. Now, when we talked with MJ last week, in the last few minutes, he said that he's concerned about Blackfoot culture loss, soil degradation, extinction of species. I was just thinking, this young man is wise beyond his years. Can you tell us a little bit more about him and his involvement?
Yeah, certainly. So MJ is one of the youngest members of our outdoor land-based greenhouse team. So he's in grade 8 right now. Well, Thomas started the program when he was in grade 7, graduated. He's now in university. Gracie is kind of in the middle, coming up, and she's really engaged in the cultural aspects of things and really connecting us to that, feminine relation with Sweetgrass. And then MJ is just a young man that has so much experience of living off the land and learning from his elders, learning from his aunts and uncles. He goes out hunting with his family. We recently had a buffalo harvest here at the school, and MJ was the leader, leading all of the junior high and high school students through it, and tagging right beside his grandma and his aunt as they were explaining how each part of the buffalo was used, and he was just absorbing it all, because I think he deeply, deeply cares about a relationship with the land. And that was another one of the successes with the school is providing another avenue for students to have success academically. Kids like MJ learn through these hands-on experiences and these stories and these narratives, and working on the Sweetgrass project, watching your plants grow, harvest, return to the land year over year over year. Someone like MJ really extracts the wisdom from those kind of long periods, and he really buys in that this land here, it is going to be his responsibility one day. And that's something that we try and impart on our students by giving them the responsibility of that entire food cycle, the entire cycle of the medicine growth and harvesting, and revitalizing and returning it back to the traditional harvest sites. I think he gets that long-term view. And it's because he has a relationship with the land that was fostered by his parents who are connected to the culture. And environmentalism isn't just about creating a habitat that's healthy and free of humans. It's about creating the habitats and landscapes that allow humans and their culture and their language to thrive.
When we think about all the damage done by residential schools, 60 Scoop, et cetera, it's wonderful to see some of this healing taking place and reconnection with the land with young people, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're at an interesting state with curriculum and the inclusion of First Nations perspectives, First Nations knowledge. And I think it's just really critical that we don't just plug First Nation languages and words and ideas into Google Translate to make them fit into the Alberta curriculum. I think it's a more difficult task, but it's a more important task for us to take concepts of the Alberta curriculum and have them infused through Piikani language and culture, through First Nations language and culture, rather than us stuffing their culture into the Western academic system. It's what value from the Western academic system does the language and culture want to take, right? And how can they use those tools and strategies under their own priorities, under their own leadership and guidance to solve the problems that are important to them, not necessarily important to the entire world.
I'm reminded of something you said before we started the formal interview, and it really struck me. You said, and I'll just set this up by saying, someone asked me the other day about the term settler, so I'll define that in case anybody is not totally clear. A settler meaning someone who's not First Nations, who arrived in North America at some point as a settler from Europe, typically. Would you agree with that definition?
Oh, yeah.
You said Indigenous ways are a mirror to help us see the settler bias in us. Tell us a little more about that statement.
Well, I would say right now in modern times, it's almost as if, the political axis is situated as settler ways of knowing and Indigenous ways of knowing. And if you are a settler, that wants to be an ally and work on these things, a lot of times we just say, oh, if I'm opposed to settler ideology. Well, therefore I must be aligned with Indigenous philosophy. But as a settler, there are settlers who are across all stripes of the political spectrum. Settlers can be progressive, they can be liberal, they can be conservative, they can be anarchist, communist, socialist. I think that when we actually authentically confront Indigenous ways of knowing and we try to engage with them authentically and earnestly, what happens is the settler biases that we maybe think that we are clear of, because you say, oh, I'm liberal, I'm on this side of the fence, so obviously I don't have any of those conservative colonial biases, right? Or, well, I'm conservative, so I don't have any of those liberal state centralized authority biases. To me, the First Nations perspective allows us to reflect on, our own stereotypes and prejudice that we may have consciously tried to pause, but are still deeply embedded in the way that we think. And you mentioned earlier about economic solutions to environmental problems. To me, I think trying to do this project led through Piikani revealed to me the bias towards economic yield and economic profit and margins and everything being monetized that exists on both the left wing and the right wing of settler ideology. And I think that's something that a lot of people are blind to, that the solution can't just be, oh, we're just going to put up a bunch of windmills and solar panels on the reserve, and that's going to solve all the problems. There are settler biases still contained within the environmental movement that a lot of, I think, environmentalists are kind of blind to in themselves. And that's something that was revealed to me through my own, approaches to this project, thinking, oh yeah, let's just slap some solar panels up and grow some vegetables. And because we're making cheaper energy, there's going to be a energy yield, plus we've got a produce yield, and we're going to be able to start stacking profit into the future. But by thinking that way, we were starting our project off completely on the wrong foot, heading down the wrong direction. So we had to completely rewind back those environmental solution biases and look at the project through a completely different lens, which is what led us to the traditional medicines like Sweetgrass.
Biases are so difficult for us to perceive, figure out, untangle, disentangle.
Yeah, and in the Western view, especially the scientific view, is we have a belief that you can pause them, that you can, separate out and then just be objective.
Right. I'm clear of that now.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily possible. I think you should contend with your biases and they need to be brought forward, but you don't put them on pause to ignore them. You put them on pause to examine them and to really contend with them and how they are matching up with the reality you see on the ground.
Recognize them and wrestle with them,
Yes.
perhaps, right? Yes. As best we can.
Yeah.
How can settlers, in your view, best learn about First Nations culture and traditions and gain some wisdom from their way of seeing the world?
Definitely avoid, pan-indigeneity assumptions. So the idea, like, oh, I learned something from this tribe over here, therefore I can apply it to these tribes here. Or oh, I did some work with this tribe over here, so obviously, this will be accepted with this other clan over here. Every single community and every single individual within every community is unique and individual and has their own perspective and their own value. And the best way to gain knowledge is to enter into an authentic relationship of reciprocity, of friendship, kinship, responsibility showing up. To me, it's not something that you can just fly in and extract information. So you really need to just commit part of your lifestyle and part of your perspective to this avenue of Canadian living. We need to see that, we are all treaty people. Even though we weren't there to sign that treaty, we are still bound by the obligations that were laid out on, because it was signed on our behalf by the Queen. We're not bystanders. Being an ally, it's not a badge that you wear. You did this one thing, so now you're an ally for good. right? It's something that you decide and enact and have to do every day. And it's something you're going to fail at. You're going to make mistakes. But I think really having the confidence to make those mistakes and keep moving forward is in an authentic relationship, it is key. You got to embrace the discomfort. You got to embrace, being wrong or being mistaken. And, over many years, you'll get a glimpse into a different perspective. But
Right. And if folks out there are looking for ways to connect, we've had in previous seasons talked with people about First Nations friendship centers. There are always events going on around communities. Often you can connect into those through your local First Nations Friendship Center or society. Also, I'll just give a little plug to an annual event that you have attended. I just attended for the first time this year. I'm wearing my shirt for it to remind me to plug it. That's the Guinea Ecosphere Protection
Association.
Thank you. They put on a summit every year in June, and it was a wonderful event in terms of experiencing First Nations wisdom and getting to just be there and continue the voyage, trying to get a little closer to understanding and meshing our worldviews.
Yeah, and I think a lot of settlers are a bit insecure. They're worried and nervous, that they won't be welcomed. But in my experience, if you're coming with an earnest desire to learn and enter into a relationship, the communities are incredibly welcoming to the point that you start to feel like family.
I'll definitely agree with that because I felt very welcome there, and I can't imagine a settler not being welcome there if they have some kind of an open mind as they come in. So another possibility for you. You can look that up next June. We could talk all day. This has been so fascinating and enlightening, but we need to wrap things up. And before we do that, tell us what your climate action is that you've chose for us today, Brett.
Oh, my climate action, planting seeds. That's it. I try and plant thousands of plants every year, whether that's at my own home garden, whether that's here out on the reserve in our tree planting initiatives, whether it's just guerrilla wildflower seeding in random places. To me, it's the adage, planting a tree from whose shade you'll never enjoy, it is the one true thing that we can do for environmental action. So to me, it's all about looking forward and kind of the slogan that revealed itself to me throughout this whole project is that youth are the number one renewable resource, and focusing on their education and their schooling is the key to us having a climate future. We got to plant those seeds, whether those are figurative or literal, just planting seeds.
Final question for you, Brett. What gives you hope?
And it's going to be a similar answer. The youth. Getting to see all of these different students at these environmental conferences, hearing their passion, seeing the eco-action projects that they're coming up on their own, leading within their schools, and not waiting for the adults of the room to give them permission. That gives me hope. And even seeing them, that they're aware, they're wrestling with climate anxiety. They're wrestling with the feeling like this is all on them. Why even try? Climate nihilism. But they're going to battle with it, and they're accepting the torch. And the youth of the world give me optimism because I get to see them and hang out with them every day here in the school. And it's a lot of potential and promise coming up in the world. I'm just glad I get to help be a part of it and see it grow.
Well, and we've heard those voices from the youngest, MJ, all the way up to the teacher to whom you have trusted this program. That must have been difficult for you to hand that baby off to Mike, but you say he's doing a great job.
Mike's doing a great job, and I'm so excited to hand it off. And, to me, that's part of being real about it being Piikani-led and Indigenous-led. If I protected it and held that project as if it was mine, I would be betraying what we set out to do in the beginning. So Mike has done a great job taking that project on, doing the composting program with the students, growing our sweetgrass, growing our mint, growing our tobacco, connecting the students with elders so that they can get the ceremonial protocols to properly do this. Yeah, it's been wonderful. I can't say enough how grateful I am to have Mike and to have our students here in Piikani.
Yeah, and to hear those voices, also, of course, Thomas and Gracie. Thank you so much for connecting us with those young people in this Piikani series.
I can't wait to see them.
And thank you so much for joining us, taking time out. Someone's knocking on the door, we've heard, so you need to get going. But thanks so much for taking time to join us.
Thank you.
And thank you, devoted audience member. And I'm going to challenge you, in the name of reconciliation, to think of someone you think would enjoy and or benefit from this First Nations wisdom that we've been hearing for the last 4 and now 5 weeks. Send them a link to one or all of these episodes, and maybe they can get some good out of this as well. We will be back again next week, same time, same place, to hear from another climate action figure. Until then,
Go figures.
This has been Climate Action Figures. Our show is produced and hosted by John Whidden. Our creative consultant is Kayla McIntosh. Our theme song is Hawaii Vacation by Tavari. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Climate Action Figures. That's all one word. And if you have any other questions or comments that arose from this or any episode, feel free to reach out to us at climateactionfigures@gmail.com. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another Climate Action Figure.